Hello, this video is going to look at how we as teachers can create a positive learning environment. So first of all, we want to acknowledge that environment does affect performance. And kind of think about in your past experiences if you've ever had a hostile work environment, or if you've ever had a really unpleasant experience that you've had as a customer, not even as an employee, but you've just went into an area to get a service and people are just hostile, unfriendly. You could almost cut the tension with a knife in the atmosphere. And how did that make you feel? Did you really want to return to that place? Did you maybe want to switch accounts to where you don't have to go to that business anymore? And what if you had to return? What if that you had no choice? You had to go and do this service and to have the service every single day. How would that affect your willingness, your security, and your attention span? And again, think about this from the aspect of students. In a way, classes, teachers, and a school system provides a service to students by educating them. However, they don't get a choice to say, well, I don't want to go to school or I want to switch teachers because it's a hostile environment. I don't feel comfortable there. They have to come every day to your class. And so, again, if it's a hostile environment or they perceive it to be a hostile environment, they're not going to be as willing to learn. They're going to have security issues. And then again, they're not going to probably pay attention for very long. And again, it may not be that you necessarily make it hostile, but if it's perceived to be that way by that student. So you definitely want to make sure you stay in tune to what the students are perceiving. So, kind of looking back at our scenario, businesses actually pay big money to make sure that the employees are properly trained to be hospitable, to have customer service. Train the managers to know how to handle the difficult situations, how to handle employees and subordinates when there is a sticky situation. And they pay big money just to foster the ambiance of the store to make sure that it is positive and soothing. And so, for example, if you've ever went into one of your favorite stores, you think, God, I love it here. I could live here. Everyone's nice. Everyone's friendly. It's cool. It's warm. They have great colors. I like the smell of the store. I like the music that they play. All of that plays into the ambiance. And a lot of times you're not even cognizant of it happening. You just happen to know that, yeah, I have a good feeling when I'm in that. And again, businesses pay big money to make sure their smells are on point. Their music that they play is appropriate to the grade level they're targeting. The colors and the organization of the store is hospitable to where you want to keep going. And so, in a way, as a teacher, you want to take some of that with you when you develop your classroom. Now, most teachers would say that some of that ambiance is expected. And so, some things that you foster during that is the safety of the students to make sure they're engaged, to keep them excited and stimulated, and to keep them motivated. So, how are the smells, the colors, the organization, you as a person, the social interactions going to foster all those different things? And this can be done, again, via the organization of the class, the colors, the decorations, the smells, and even the furniture arrangement. We're going to look specifically at the furniture arrangement of how you can dictate that to foster the type of learning that you support in your class. Now, a lot of teachers may say, well, I'm not an interior decorator. I don't know what colors match. I don't know what smells smell good. I don't know how to arrange my classroom to make it pretty. It's not about pretty. What it is about is that the expectation of the instructional materials on the walls, that there are clear rules posted, that there are organized materials, and that so that the students have an understanding of what they should and will do. So again, we're not asking you to be an interior decorator. We're just asking you to think things through and make sure that everything is crystal clear from the beginning for the students and that everything is organized. And you can actually determine how a classroom is run just by looking at the physical space. So if you look at this image below, you can start to make you can probably pinpoint what grade level it was, and you can start to make you can start to make some conclusions about how the class is run. Obviously, the students are sitting at tables in groups, so they're probably working in groups. They're not isolated by themselves. You see different centers, so they probably break out into different learning centers. So probably centers are fostered there. You see lots of colors and lots of images on the wall. And actually, if you look closely, those images are instructional materials. They're not just decoration. It's how to count money, the alphabet, things like that, that should be instructional materials to help the students. So again, this group is obviously going to foster instruction, it's going to foster group work, and it's going to foster centers. And we can draw that just by looking at the classroom. So let's look at the images of these four very different classrooms. And as you look at them, think about what type of instruction you think occurs in each. Draw some conclusions about that. Also, think about how the ambiance is different in each of the classes. How does the difference among the colors, the organization, the furniture scheme, how does it make you feel as a student if you were a student in that class? And what does it say about you as a teacher? Now, again, I want to make sure to note not to get too wrapped up in color. Think about the functionality and how it fits in your teaching style. You'll see a lot of middle school and high school teachers kind of shy away from a lot of the primary and really bright colors, which is fine. Again, think functionality. Also, keep in mind that some students, especially those with certain disabilities, can't handle too much color, can't handle too much distraction, can't handle too much on the walls. So if you are a special ed teacher, you have to be careful about that because it can be actually distracting to students who have hypersensitivity, such as those with autism spectrum disorders. So again, you might not want to make it too colorful, but again, being organized is really the key here. So, according to your text, 20% of students report not feeling emotionally or physically safe at school. And this is the learning environment includes the physical space, which we've touched on before, and we're going to touch on some more, as well as the social space, which we get to in a little bit. But again, a important note that I wanted to make here is that 20% of students are saying that they don't feel emotionally or physically safe at school. And so, how can you as a teacher adjust your physical and social space to make sure that doesn't happen in your classroom? So, the behavioral setting is defined as how the setting is arranged to entice certain behaviors. So, again, we talked a little bit about this at the beginning that businesses arrange the furniture within their store to entice you to do certain things. They put candy at the checkout because they know that you're tired from shopping, you're more likely to grab a candy bar as you're checking out. They don't put that in the middle of the store because who would do that in the middle of the store? They put sales kind of at the front of the store because they know that you're more likely to, that's what you're going to see first, that's what you're going to pick up first. They put things on the mid-level eye level of what you're going to buy most. They're not going to put it very high up or very low on the bottom because you're going to buy what you see at your direct eye level. So again, the way that you set things up entice certain behaviors. This is true in a classroom by how you set up your physical space in the furniture in your classroom. So what we're going to do is the first thing you want to do as a teacher is determine how to teach, how you as a teacher are going to teach, and the movement you expect in the classroom, or if you expect any movement at all. And then you want to set up your classroom to mimic that teaching style, that movement, and what you expect the students to be able to do. So let's look at one of the images that we looked at before. Just by looking at this, some conclusions that could be drawn is that this teacher probably lectures a lot. You see, it's all the chairs are pointing towards the front of the classroom. They probably write a lot on the wall, on the chalkboard, which is at the front of the room, and there's a lot of chalkboard. So they probably use a lot of visual learning because they're usually writing on the board. Also, there's probably a lot of auditory learning. The teacher's probably standing there writing on the board and talking. So, a lot of visual and auditory learning. You can see it's pretty teacher centered. The students are going to be watching the teacher the whole time. You see that there's probably very little group work because if you see how tightly crammed they are, they're probably not talking to each other. They would have to either somebody would have to turn around or somebody would have to turn to the side. So, there's probably not a lot of group work. There's probably little interaction among the peers sitting at the different tables. And so this is typical of what you might see in a college classroom, maybe a high school classroom, but again, it's very lecture based and teacher centered. Now, this one is somewhat similar. You see they're all pointing towards the front of the classroom, but you see that there are some area for centers. If you notice over in the corner, there are some different tables with some computers set up. So there is some fostering of centers. Also, notice again, there is some colors, which just kind of hint at maybe a different ambiance for the classroom. Also, if you notice kind of at the back corner, there is a circle table, which is where the teacher probably pulls small groups. So very typical of what you'd see in an elementary school, middle school classroom, an area for small groups, an area for individual work, and then over on the side, an area for centers. Now, let's look at this classroom. It is very different than the others. It seems that the teacher would focus on group activities where the students are in different groups, because if you notice, the tables are set up to where there's 4 or 5 students at each table, so they're probably working in groups quite often. There is some whole group rug time where you see where the students probably sit on the rug facing that active board or that interactive whiteboard there, but it's probably a small amount of time because they're sitting on the floor. So it's probably very little small whole group time, more time at the centers and working in groups. There's also storage, which is something you want to make a note of. Is that over on the side you see a bookshelf by one of the groups, and you see cubbies by one of the groups. So you see students can easily get to the materials that they need. Um, there's also an area for their personal belongings and storage, which are those little cubbies on the left side there. And so everything is at the student's reach. So by having that, it's more of a student-centered classroom. A lot of group work, center work, a little bit of whole-time instruction, and then all of the materials are on the student's level, which is something I definitely encourage, is making sure all the storage areas is on the student's level so they can get it themselves, and that it's in the appropriate place, because you don't want the student having to cross the entire room to get markers if the art center's across the room. So you want them to kind of have things set up to where they can pretty much help themselves. Now, looking next, this one's a little bit more different. This teacher has a mobile classroom because if you notice, the chairs are on wheels. And so that means that the teacher probably mixes up how they teach. So, again, if you have the option of putting your desk or chairs on wheels, definitely do so, because then you can move them around pretty easily and go from a whole group to a small group, from lecture based, everybody facing forward, to being in small groups, to being in a discussion, debate type area. So you can kind of be mobile and teach in different ways. It seems to be very auditory based because you see there's not really a lot of room for visuals. There's the active board in the back, but there's not really a whole lot of space for visuals. So it's probably going to be a lot of conversations. It's currently set up for a debate or a discussion among students, which is very student centered. If you see, they're kind of in that half circle where everyone faces everyone, and so that you can easily talk back and forth, and everyone's kind of on the same level and playing field. And so, again, it's kind of enticing a whole group discussion, which is very typical if you, again, are having a debate in a classroom. So again, as you start to design your classroom, when you're thinking about how you're going to lay out your furniture, you want to first ask yourself, how do I teach the most? Am I lecture based? Am I discussion based? Am I group based? Am I going to be center based? How am I going to do that? Do I want my students to work together often? Do I want them to be kind of passive to where it's mainly me and they're just listening to me? Or do I want them more active? Do I want them to have resources that they can easily get to near their group area or their individual desk area? Do I teach mainly visually, auditory, or hands-on? If I teach hands-on, I'm going to need a lot of manipulatives, and I'm going to need a lot of storage space on the student's level for them to get to those manipulatives. If I'm auditory, I'm going to need them facing me so they can hear and see my voice, and see my lips moving. If I'm visually, I'm going to need a lot of space for visuals. I'm probably going to need several chalkboards, several active boards, things like that, so I can teach visually. And also, again, as we saw in the last image, it's okay to mix it up, especially if you have wheels. If you don't have wheels, you can still move around your tables. It's okay every once in a while to say, we're going to do a debate this week. We're going to sit like this. We're going to be in groups this week. We're going to sit like this. We're going to be in lecture. It's okay to mix it up. Again, I do suggest that you use a lot of covered storage. You can get storage areas and bookshelves and cover them just with different curtains or fabric so that it doesn't look cluttered when you walk in, but the students can easily pull those curtains back and get to what they need to, because the more you can help them help themselves, the less you as a teacher have to run back and forth getting them their materials. So again, a lot of it is about thinking ahead and organizing it based upon how you're going to teach and what's going to be the most functional. Now, a note that your book makes is that you cannot control how many students are in your classroom. That's kind of something that's given to you. Depending on your different class sizes, it may be 18 all the way up to 30. If you teach an EIP class, which is kind of a smaller level class, you may have 11 or 12, but it really just depends. Also, you can't define how big your classroom's going to be. Some schools have really large classrooms, some have really small classrooms. So it's really, not your decision. But if you can, maximize the space by avoiding clutter or unnecessary furniture, because you want to give the students as much personal space as you can. Your book does a good job of defining what happens when students are really close together. There's more fighting involved, there's more anxiety involved, because you just don't have your personal space. Especially when you get to middle school, high school, you're dealing with bigger students, they need their personal space. So again, don't try to squish people into a room. Don't try to have 10 people sitting at one table if you can help it. If you can avoid having a filing cabinet or avoid having this extra bookshelf, move that out so you can give your students more space. Also, be careful with your decorations. I see a lot of, especially elementary school teachers, but I don't really want to call anybody out. But you see a lot of them will start using lots of decorations that really are cute, but they don't really have a purpose. You want to ask yourself, is this helping a student learn? If it's not, if it's really just cute, then it's more of a decoration. So focus more on instructional materials that either give some type of academic assistance. Maybe it's a gallon man that shows how to break down the different types of fluid. Maybe it's a multiplication chart. Maybe it's what to do if you don't recognize a word, those type things. Maybe it's a timeline of major events in history. It's academic based. Or maybe it's something that's expectation or rules. I definitely encourage you having your rules listed somewhere, even if they're very basic, having them listed somewhere on one of your walls. Or positive reminders. Everyone can learn. Have a good day. Those type things. But if it's just decoration, maybe think of a way that you can change it. Maybe put your rules on there. Maybe put your positive reminders on there to where it has a purpose. Maybe put a vocabulary word of the day on there. Something to where the students are learning from it. It's not just decoration. The next discussion looks at instructional time. And so this is how much time you have when you're actually teaching a lesson. There's three types. The first is allocated time. Now, allocated time is how much time you plan for a lesson or part of a lesson to take. It's kind of what your basic bare bones schedule would look like. And at some point before you start teaching, you do sit down and make your schedule. We're going to spend so and so many minutes for reading. We're going to spend so and so many readings from or minutes for math. We're going to spend any one lesson, we're going to do a 10-minute warm-up activity. Then we're going to do a 10-minute introduction into the lesson. Then we're going to do a 20-minute activity. I'm going to give them 10 minutes for a quick assessment, and then we're going to wrap up in 5 minutes. So that's more of your planning stages. You're allocating your time throughout the day, which you definitely want to do because, again, you don't want to run out of time. You don't want to over plan either. So you kind of want to make sure, and it takes some time where you learn kind of roughly how much time this is going to take a student. And that's something, again, you do learn because it's hard your first year to say this activity is going to take these students 20 minutes because you just don't know your students yet and you don't really know the development of that age group yet. So it does take some time. But by the time you've taught for a couple of years, you'll be able to say, oh, this assignment will take them 30 minutes and then we can move on. Or this assignment's probably going to take them an hour. I need to build in some time after lunch for them to do it, that kind of thing. So it's allocated time. It's planned time. Now, different than that is the engaged time. So that's when you're actually teaching the lesson, how much time the students are actually engaged in the lesson and not interrupted. Now, usually your engaged time is going to be longer than your allocated time. You may allot 10 minutes for a warm-up activity. But when they start doing the warm-up activity during the engaged time, in the middle comes on the announcements. That takes up 5 minutes. In the middle, you're having to correct somebody's behavior. You're having to stop the lesson for 3 minutes to tell somebody to sit down. You have a fire drill in the middle of it. So very quickly, your 10-minute warm up turns to 20 minutes, and that takes you off your whole schedule. So again, you have to be flexible and know how to adjust for those things and how to take that 10-minute wrap up or introduction and switch it to maybe 5 minutes because you don't have enough time. So again, allocated time, planned time, engaged time is actually how much time you're actually doing the lesson, and it usually ends up being longer because of interruptions. Also, a lot of times students don't catch on as quickly as you think that they will, and it takes them longer, and you have to adjust for that. Now, every once in a while, students will catch on quicker than you thought they would, and you actually end up gaining time, which is more easily filled than losing time. The last is academic learning time, which is a little bit different than engaged time. Engaged time is how much time you're actually spending on the lesson. academic learning time is a subset of that, of how much time the students are actually learning. So say we're doing a lesson on multiplication and I allot 10 minutes for it. That's my allotted time. Say that we get interrupted and it takes 20 minutes to actually do it. That's the engaged time. Now, say that maybe two people actually learned something from the lesson and are successful with their multiplication tables based upon my lesson. Only two of those people actually had academic learning time. Everyone else, even though it was time well spent, they actually don't get to count that towards their academic learning time because they didn't learn anything. So, again, this is the time it takes for a student to actually learn a concept. It may take several days. And that's different than the engaged time. And it can be difficult because it's harder to measure. So, to keep yourself from spending a very long amount of engaged time, um, you probably want to do a lot of self checks along the way for the students to make sure that it is actually turning into academic learning time. So, you can do what's called a formative assessment, which are very basically small checks in learning. It's not a big test, it's not anything formalized, it's just a basic formative learning. So, you may say, give me a show of hands if you think that you're learning something. Or, hey, let's do a 3-minute pop quiz. Or let me ask you a couple of questions and let me see how many of you can answer it. Those type things. So again, very quick, but able to give me a good idea of who's getting it and who's not, so I know whether to move on, stay there, or try to teach it in another way. Now, we talked a little bit about the physical elements of the classroom. Now let's talk about the social elements of the classroom, which affect the learning environment and how positive or negative it is. So social elements focus on how to keep a classroom positive, how to keep the social interactions among you and the students to the other students. Also, how to keep your instruction moving, how not to become stagnant, how to actually promote the academic learning time, how to deal with behavior in the classroom, especially disruptions, and then how to exchange trust and respect among your students, which will help with number 3, the behavior. So, before you start deciding on those different social elements, how you're going to keep your classroom positive, how you're going to keep your instruction moving, how you're going to deal with behavior, you have to look at first what you think of as the role of a teacher. All of us have different perspectives of what we feel like the ultimate role of a teacher is. So, you kind of have to define what you think it is because that's going to affect how you answer these upcoming questions. So first, let's just look at this graphic, and you can see how there are different beliefs about learners, and that affects your role as a teacher. So for example, if I feel that my students are raw material, they come in, they don't know anything, and I have to teach them they're raw material that I have to mold into something. Then over there on the side, you can see I'm more of a sage on the stage. I'm more of a soloist, which means I'm going to probably lecture a lot more because I'm assuming the students know nothing. They bring nothing to the table. So I'm going to have to teach them everything. That's probably less common among teachers now than ever before. Maybe I believe that students are individual explorers. So I'm more of a constructivist learner or teacher, and I believe that students have some knowledge, but they have to make sense of that knowledge on their own. I can give them knowledge and content, but they have to explore it and come up with their own conclusions. So that means I'm more of a facilitator. I'm not going to do a whole lot of lecturing up there. I'm going to have them in groups exploring, manipulating. I'm going to give them some guidance, but I'm going to have them really manipulating and exploring. And so maybe I have a feeling, maybe I believe that students are partners. Maybe I believe in social learning and that students have to work together to be able to bring about new understandings. So in that aspect, I might be a coach or a mentor. I'm going to put them together in groups and I'm going to walk around and mentor them and coach them and give them some ideas, but I'm going to let them work together to kind of foster their ideas and come up with conclusions. So again, you have to think about what do you think the role of a learner is, and what do you think the role of a teacher is? Also, here are some more teacher roles. Do you believe that the teacher is a role model? Do you believe that their job is mainly to provide information? the information itself, which again goes back to the lecturer type of standpoint? Or do you believe they're more of a resource developer? So they don't really give you the content per se, they give you the resources and let the students figure out the content themselves. Do you think that they're more of a planner than anything else? They do a lot of planning, a little bit of teaching, a little bit of assessing, but mainly planning heavy. Do you think that they're mainly an assessor? So mainly they focus on assessment more than anything else. So again, you want to look at these roles and define what do you think the major role of a teacher is, because that again is going to affect how you instruct, how you behave, and kind of how the classroom is run. So your book details different types of authority in the classroom. It kind of gives the pluses and the minuses to each of those. And so let's kind of review them and look at them in some real world perspectives. The first part is legitimate authority. And this is basically the authority that technically teachers do have. Technically, you are the one responsible and accountable for these students. If something bad were to happen in your classroom, you would be the one responsible because you are the adult in the classroom, despite their age. You are the one who signed the contract, who's supposed to take care of these students, supposed to teach them. So again, if they don't pass their state test, if they fail the class, to an extent, you are held accountable for that. So technically, you do have legitimate authority. However, as you can guess, most students do not always abide by that. They don't just say, wow, this teacher is my teacher, they're responsible for me, so I'm going to do exactly what they want me to do. Because students usually challenge authority that they've been told to follow, especially certain age groups. You know, you don't just say you're going to respect me because I'm your teacher. A lot of time that doesn't work with students. You kind of have to earn that. So also with this, there are limits in terms of behavior what a teacher or an administrator can even do to a student who doesn't respect. There's been some changes. A lot of times, mainly it ends up being in school suspension, maybe suspension outside of school, even though a lot of schools don't like to do that because the student misses instructional time. There are limits to what the teacher can do if the student is misbehaving. And so that does affect the legitimate authority. Next, we're going to look at reward authority, and that kind of bleeds into some educational theories that you definitely want to be aware of when you're designing your classroom management program. So, reward authority is basically states that the teacher has the power to give the rewards and punishments as they see fit. So, there is a level of authority there. If you do what I want, I'll give you this. If you don't do what I want, I won't give you this. And you kind of have that ability to do that and sometimes manipulate behavior based upon that. Now, there are different types of rewards and punishments and kind of the systems that work with that. So let's review these. And again, these do bleed into some different educational theories. So, first of all, I want to make sure that you understand in psychology, reinforcement isn't always something positive. Basically, reinforcement means I'm giving you something. Punishment means I'm taking something away. So don't get thrown off by the terms positive and negative. Positive means I'm giving something, negative means I'm taking something away. It doesn't necessarily mean bad or good. So, first of all, positive reinforcement means I'll give you, as the teacher, I'll give you something as the student that you will like if you do what I want you to do. So, case in point is candy. I will give you a piece of candy if you don't talk while I'm trying to teach the lesson. I will give you verbal praise if you help your neighbor. I will let you have extra recess if you do your homework on time. So, again, I'm giving you something that you're going to enjoy if you do what I want you to do. The next is negative reinforcement. So, I will take something away that you don't like if you do what I want you to do. So, the result is the same. You're doing what I want you to do. But I'm going to take something away that you don't like. Case in point, nagging. I will not nag you if you don't do if you do your homework. So I'm taking something away that you don't like so that you get if you do what you want. So I will take away your extra homework if you do what I want you to do. So if you do your classwork now and do it very well, I won't give you extra homework. I'm taking away something that you won't like to if in exchange for you doing something that I want you to do. Now, the next part is positive punishment. So, I'll give you something that you don't like if you don't do what I want. So, again, me as the teacher, I'm going to give you something that you don't like if you don't do what I want. So, I'll give you detention if you talk while I'm trying to teach my lesson, which is something I don't want. Or in a parenting standpoint, I'll give you a spanking if you hit your brother or sister, which is something I don't want you to do. Okay? Next, we have negative punishment. So, I'll take something that you do like away if you don't do what I want. And again, that kind of has a tendency to be older students. I'll take away your cell phone if you don't do something I want. So, if you don't do your homework, I'll take away your cell phone. I will take away your preferred seating if you don't stop talking. So I'll take something away that you want, which is your preferred seating, if you don't do what I want you to do. So positive punishment tends to be with younger students. I'm going to give you something that you're not going to like if you don't do what I want. Negative punishment seems to be with older students. I'm going to take something away that you do like if you don't do what I want. So again, different types of reinforcements and punishments. Now, out of these, which is most effective, it's actually the positive reinforcement. So it is, I'm going to give you something that you will like if you do what I want. You happen to see a lot of students or a lot of teachers using the other three, either giving you something negative or taking away something you like. But actually, students respond better with, I'll give you something that you like if you do what I want you to do, which is positive reinforcement. Actually, a lot of schools have developed a system-wide PBIS program, which is positive behavioral incentive support or system. So basically, it's a system that is set up that focuses on giving positive rewards for positive or good behavior. Oftentimes, it is mimicked after play money. So there will be a system in the class or amongst the whole school to where students can earn fake money by doing good things. You do your homework, I give you so many fake dollars. You help a friend, I see you helping a friend, you get so many fake dollars. You don't get your name pulled or your tag moved or whatever so many times a day, you get so many dollars. You save up this fake dollars and then you get to go to the school store and buy different items. Maybe it's a piece of candy, maybe it's a pencil, maybe it's even something larger. I get to buy a ticket to go to the school dance. I get to buy a ticket to go play on the bouncy house on fun day. So it's a lot of different things that they kind of try to tap into what students want to elicit that positive behavior. Now, something you want to be very careful in doing is using that type of behaviorism in, I'm going to manipulate your behavior based upon giving you something, because we also have intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is motivation that comes from within the person. So I want to do well in school because I want to be successful as a person. I want to do well in school because I want to be able to get a good job and I want to be proud of myself. So you see, the motive is coming from within. I want to be proud of myself. I want to get a good job. It's all something from within. Extrinsic motivation is outside motivation. So I'm going to do something because I want something outside of my own body. I'm going to get something outside of my own body that's going to make me feel good, and that's why I'm going to do this. So it's motivation from with outside the person. So I want to do well because I'm going to get a reward, a physical reward of some kind, be it candy, be it praise, be it I'm going to avoid punishment. Could be another way. It's something coming external. And we still do this as adults. A lot of us are extrinsically motivated. We get up and we go to work. Why? To make money, which is an extrinsic motivation. Now, some of us get up and go to work because we love our jobs. We like making a difference. We want to be proud of ourselves, which is intrinsic motivation. But if it's an extrinsic outside of your body motivator, then it is extrinsic motivation. So if we go back, a lot of these PBIS programs are giving you money, fake money, that allow you to buy external objects, which is extrinsic motivation. A lot of times, if this behavior is too fostered, what you'll see happen sometimes is a student will say, I'm not going to do my homework unless you're going to give me this fake money so I can go to the football game. And that's not really what the purpose is. You're supposed to do your homework to want to do your homework to be able to learn. I shouldn't have to pay you to do something that you should be doing anyways. Because then this bleeds over. Should you pay students to take out, should you pay your children to take out the trash? Should you pay your children to be nice to each other, their siblings? I mean, those are kind of expectations that I shouldn't have to pay you to do. Those should be intrinsic motivation. You should want to take out the trash to have a nice, clean house. You should be nice to your sibling because you're brothers and sisters and you should love each other. It should be intrinsic, not extrinsic. So you don't want to foster that too much. So now let's look at what happens if we go back to our different types of rewards and punishment. That is based upon Skinner's operant conditioning. And this is based upon behaviorism, which is an educational theory subset that basically says that an individual or any living being, a lot of times it's done with animals, the behavior of that individual or animal can be manipulated based upon external stimuli. And so basically it's training. I can train someone. And really, if we go back and look at our different types of reinforcement, this is basically training. I'm going to train you to do what I want by either giving you candy, giving you a positive reinforcement, taking something away, so I'm not going to stop nagging you, a positive punishment, I'm going to give you a spanking, or negative punishment, I'm going to take your cell phone away. If I do this enough, I'm going to train you to do what I want you to do, or to stop doing what I don't want you to do, which is kind of the whole theory behind a lot of classroom management or even home management with your own children. So this has a basis again in operant conditioning. And basically what happens is you can give somebody something to make them react in a certain way, take something away to make them react in a certain way, give them something negative to make them not do something, or take away something negative to make them not do something. So, be careful because rewards again can backfire. And we talked a little bit about becoming focused on external motivation versus internal motivation, extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation, which is definitely an issue that you don't want to foster in your class. And other things you definitely want to be concerned about are giving rewards in an exaggerated way, because that can definitely embarrass students, especially in middle school and high school. No one wants to be seen as the teacher's pet. No one wants for that to seem insincere. You don't want to just make this big, lavish rewards system, or this big deal of giving someone a reward, because it kind of embarrasses them. So you probably don't want to do that, or at least be conscious of it and make sure that student is going to be okay with you doing that. You don't want to do it continuously. If you give rewards every single day, again, it's going to become extrinsic versus intrinsic. It's going to become part of the norm and it's going to become expected. Then you're going to have the problem with trying to get your students to do something they should be doing anyway. Also, you don't want to give it for every little thing. You want it to be noteworthy. You don't want it to be, oh, you did your homework. Okay, well here's a piece of candy. Oh, you did your classwork. Well, here's a piece of candy. You want it to be something noteworthy so that they see how important that one specific task is. Also, you don't want the reward to be the same thing because students aren't going to respond to the same thing. Some students don't like candy, and so if you're always only giving candy, they're never going to be motivated because they don't like candy. Or you can't always take the same thing away. If I'm always going to take away recess, well, some students would rather sit in the nice, cool, air conditioned building and read a book. They don't want to go outside and play. So if you're constantly taking away something that doesn't matter to them, you're not really working the behaviorism aspect of it. Also, be very careful that not to avoid only certain groups getting the rewards. And a lot of times this will happen without you consciously being aware of it. Make sure that you give everyone the opportunity to earn a reward. So make sure that you reward also for effort and improvement, which bleeds into our second note, or our next note here. Don't only give for academics, because you're going to have some students, again, who may have special needs. They're never going to make a 100 on the test. So that means they're never going to get reinforced. They're never going to get a reward. And what's going to happen to them, what we talked about before, is the learned helplessness. They're going to say, well, I'm never going to do anything right, and I might as well stop trying. So again, give rewards for effort or for improvement. Wow, you went from having two, words correct on this paper to four words correct. Wow, that's an improvement for you. So you get a reward as well. So again, you want to make sure that you give for more than just academics, and make sure that you do it for effort and improvement. And then finally, don't give rewards for no reason, because that does not help students establish the connection between doing what I want you to do and getting a reward. Make sure that you're very clear with, you're getting this reward because of X, Y, and Z. That also shows the student why they're getting reward, as well as those who are not getting the reward, they understand why they're not getting the reward. All right, moving on to our different types of power. We talked about legitimate power. We also talked about reward power. Now we're talking about coercive power, which again kind of bleeds into legitimate power, that technically you do have the ability to control the student based upon punishments, rewards. So technically you do have ultimate authority over the student. And a lot of teachers kind of tap into this power more than anything. It's the because I said so, because I'm the teacher and you're going to do what I say type of power. Now, that tends to work a little bit better with younger students, but once you get into middle school and high school, that starts to develop power struggles. Students will fight you because they don't see you as a viable source of authority, or maybe they don't like authority, or they've had issues with authority, and they don't want that. So, again, power struggles. And a lot of it's because the students do not feel respected. Developmentally, at middle school, high school level, students want to feel respected as beings. So by saying because I said so and belittling them, you're actually taking away that respect. Um, so you want to make sure that the students also understand why the punishment policies and procedures that you're punishing them by or rewarding them by, make sure they understand why it is in place. You don't do your homework, you have detention. Well, why? Well, because if you don't do your homework, I'm not able to see that you learn, and therefore I'm not able to move on. If I move on without you learning, then you're getting behind. Students need to know the means behind that madness, the means behind your rules and procedures. And most of the time, it boils down to I'm trying to help you learn or I'm trying to keep you safe. If students can see that, they're much more likely to accept that policy or procedure because they see at the root that it's trying to help them and it's not just some artificial thing of why you want things running in your classroom. Also, make sure that your students don't feel threatened by that, and that your power in the classroom is not threatening. Because a lot of times, if students feel threatened or disrespected, they tend to misbehave more because they're trying to get back at the teacher. So a lot of times they'll misbehave, they won't follow directions, they kind of push the buttons because they know that they're purposely breaking the rule because they don't feel respected. So if you don't respect me, then I'm not going to respect you and I'm not going to do what you want me to do. Again, much more prevalent among middle school and high school, but you'll see that especially in upper elementary school or with students who may, per se, may have problems with authority or perhaps, have behavior issues even at a young age. So next comes expert power, and that is caused from that is the power of the teacher based upon their knowledge of the content. Most of the time in the classroom, you're going to be the smartest one in terms of that content. You're going to know social studies inside and out. You're going to know math inside and out, and it's your role as the teacher to pass that information along to the students. So yes, you're the expert in the classroom. But it goes beyond just knowing your content. Just knowing your content's not helping the students at all. You have to know how to teach that content on that student's level. So you have to go from being an expert to being a beginner and teach it on their level, not above their heads. You have to know how to engage the students. You can't just stand up there and talk about all this stuff that you know about. You have to get them engaged and excited about it. You have to help them connect it to their prior knowledge. So you have to get into what they know and help them connect it. Again, not just standing up there talking about what you know about, helping them see it on their level. And then you have to know how to apply it to their outside life and for students to see that importance. Because a lot of times students don't connect that importance of the content to the outside world by themselves. You have to show them you're going to need to know this content when you grow up because of X, Y, and Z. So and that's a lot of times how students will accept it as a student. If you can't show me how I'm going to learn it in the outside world, I have no need of learning it. Also, so very important, make sure that you do not just follow the teacher's guide and use the pre-built lessons. Because again, you may know the content, but students are going to catch on very quickly that you're not engaging them, they're not connecting it to the prior knowledge, and it kind of gives off an air of, I don't really care, I'm just going to do the pre-made lessons, and I'm not really trying to plan to help you be engaged. Also, show your enthusiasm for the topic. Most of the time, you are going to be enthusiastic because you're becoming a teacher. You obviously want to teach students. So, show your enthusiasm because that can be contagious. Also, be aware that a great deal of pre-planning is going to be involved because you're not just going to use those pre-made teacher guides, walk in there cold and try to read through it, get confused yourself, have to figure out how they want it done. No, you're going to develop these really engaging lessons, which is going to take time. If you have a lot of expert power and again are using more than just your content knowledge, but a lot of the different elements here, students will more than likely be so engaged with your lesson that they're not going to have time to be disruptive. If students are truly engaged and bought into your lesson, they're not going to be confused, so they're not going to start acting up. They're not going to be bored, so they're not going to start acting up. And a lot of times, those two elements are what cause a lot of behavior problems. It's the fact that students have gotten so confused that they can't move forward, so they start acting up, or they're so bored with the content, they have no buy-in to the content that they're going to start acting up. So again, focus on designing the lesson to be very engaging and connecting so that the students kind of have a buy-in. Now, the last type of power, reverent power. When a teacher has the reverent power in a classroom, it's something that's more or less earned. Again, legitimate and coercive power, kind of by nature, because you're the person in charge in the classroom, you kind of have it. But reverent power is earned by the students, and it is done by being viewed as fair, trustworthy, honest, and sincere among your students. It's more than just being a good teacher. At that point, the students begin to see you as a role model. And so a lot of times they're watching you outside of your regular content in classroom. They're seeing how you interact with other students. They're seeing how you interact with um, other teachers. They're seeing you as a good person and somebody that is trustworthy. They're the type of, with this power, teachers who have this power, usually students who see this are able to go and seek advice later. They don't always, it's not always that the reverent power teachers give the students what they want. That's not necessarily what it is. It's not being a pushover, it's not giving in to them so that you can earn the respect. It's that the students understand what they deserve and why they are getting it. So, for example, a teacher with reverent power may not give everybody an A in the class, but the students who didn't earn an A, they understand why they didn't, and they can respect it because it was fair and legitimate and trustworthy. So again, it's not about giving them what they want. It's being very crystal clear and fair and sincere about it. Now, some tips about classroom behavior. A great quote in your book is which is talking about a student, he's been developing these attitudes for 13 years. So you're not going to change them in a few days, this was in context of a teacher talking to another teacher who was having a problem with a student. So again, the behaviors of a student have been fostered for years. Either perhaps people have tried to correct them and were not successful, or maybe it hasn't even tried to been corrected. So again, don't get upset with yourself because you're not able to fix their behavior in 1 or 2 days. Sometimes, again, they've been trained in a way that takes you a while to untrain them. But a couple of things you want to keep in mind is always preserve the student's dignity, especially with upper level students, but with also younger level students. Because if students detect that you're trying to respect them and that you're trying to see things from their perspective, usually they're more likely to comply because they can say, wow, this teacher's at least trying to understand me. If you block them out and say, these are my rules, this is my house, and using that coercive and legitimate authority, then they're more likely to block you out and perhaps even go the opposite and say, well, I'm going to show them, and then again misbehave and not pay attention. Also, if you can discipline in private, making a big show of things, calling someone out in public sometimes has a adverse reaction, because a lot of times it turns into a power struggle. If you call out a high school student and start bad mouthing him in front of his peers, almost you're setting yourself up for that student to come back at you with some type of verbal altercation. So again, if you can, if it's not something immediate, just kind of ask them to stay after class, come in later, and then discuss it in private because again, they're more likely to comply and they're more appreciative of you preserving their dignity. Also, be fair. Even among the youngest students, they can tell if you're showing favoritism. Even if you're not even aware that you're doing it. Make sure that every classroom rule, every reward, every punishment is well defined and that it applies to everyone. If you say you're going to give a piece of candy to everyone who does their homework better get a piece of candy. If you say that if you don't do your homework, you're going to miss recess, even if it's your best friend's child, they better miss recess if they don't do their homework. Because if not, other students are going to detect it. You're going to lose your reverent power and they're not going to trust you. Also, be consistent. Every time something is done, make sure that that punishment or reward is given. So again, if a student loses their homework every single day, you can't on Monday, Tuesday make him stand and the rest of the time let him play, because you're going to confuse what rules are enforceable and what rules are not. Now, use discretion. Because again, it may be if the student never brings his homework, it may be a deeper issue than that. It may be you may want to look into a parent teacher conference. You may want to discuss, does he have the resources at home? Does he have the time at home? You may need to make exceptions for that. So again, don't just, constantly punish someone without looking deeper into it if it becomes that big of an issue. But for the most part, be consistent, because if you're not, you're never going to train the student. Also, don't make empty threats. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you say you're going to give me X amount of time of your recess, if you do not stop talking, then if they don't stop talking, you better make them stand at recess. If not, it's an empty threat, and again, it's not being consistent. All right, so different ways to handle the classroom behavior. These are just a couple of them. And again, it changes based upon your level of students and the significance of the issue. But try to give verbal warnings. Again, try to do it kind of in private. You don't really want to call out an individual student. You may just say, I understand that some people in this classroom are talking too much. Can we please calm down and listen to the lesson? That kind of thing. You don't want to pinpoint any one person if you can. Do more again with reinforcement. Again, we talked about positive reinforcement being more effective. Try to be more positive. Wow, I see the majority of the class is really listening. I wish the other half of the class would maybe learn from those and continue to listen. So you're focusing on the positive. Also, if you happen to have a student who gets in trouble a lot, make sure to really praise him or her if they are doing something right. Use nonverbal signals. You don't always have to stop the lesson. Maybe do different motions with your hands. Give that student eye contact. Maybe do a special tap on your desk to let them know that this is annoying, please stop. And again, you would have to train them at the beginning to know that. Maybe stop and wait. If too many people are talking, just stop. They'll get the clue. They'll stop talking, and then you continue. So it's more of a stop and wait. Make sure that if you do call out infractions, that you explain what needs to be stopped and what needs to be done. So you can't just say, class, you need to behave. It's class, you need to stop talking while I'm trying to talk so that we can learn. If you stop talking now, then we'll get in groups and there may be time at the end for you to have a short conversation. So I'm telling you what you need to stop doing and what you need to be doing. Also, try to ignore irritating behavior. If it's not hugely significant, you may just want to ignore it, because, again, a lot of times students act out for attention. And so if you give them that attention, that's just fostering it. Also, avoid yelling or getting visibly irritated, because that's exactly what some want. Try to remain cool, remain in control, and remain calm, and let them know what's happening and what needs to be stopped. Also, you can give students a choice. You can do this, but if you do this, this will happen. Sometimes that will help students buy in. You can behave and you can have recess, or you can misbehave and then you can miss recess, but it's up to you. It's your choice. So kind of giving into that lets them see that they do have a say so. Also, I do want to jut in here, try to avoid class-wide punishment, because that doesn't really help anybody. It just makes everyone irritated. Focus the punishment based upon the individual student. Also, looking at your teacher parent conferences or teacher student conferences, depending on the age of the student. A couple of things, if you do happen to have a parent teacher conference, what you want to have with you or what you want to think about. Number one is to bring backup for everything that you say. So if you're meeting with a parent to talk about a child's behavior, you better have major backup to say, this is what he was doing, this is why he's doing it, and this is how I asked him to fix it, and this is how many times he did not fix it. Because just coming in there making accusations about a student will definitely make a parent irritated. Also, this is something you want to do with students as well. If you're having a conference with an elementary student, if you're having a conference with a high school student, say, listen, here's my documentation. This is what you've been doing. I have a time log of everything that you've done that I've asked you not to do. It is dated and timed. I have a number of occurrences. You got out of your seat 15 times today when I asked you not to do it. 15 times. this is the punishment that was given. This is how that was handled. This is how long it took before another issue occurred. So, you've got out of your seat 15 times today, you missed recess, this happened over a week, and you still consistently do it. So obviously this punishment is not working. So we need to address that. So again, you're documenting every single thing that you say, especially for parents who haven't been there every day. So they don't know how many times their child's been doing it. Having documentation to show that is definitely going to help the parent buy into the issue more. Also, before you go in, depersonalize, because someone probably is going to make it about you. Either the teacher, either maybe perhaps the parent, maybe perhaps the student is going to say somehow it's your fault. At that point, you need to depersonalize. It's about the issue and fixing the issue. It's not about you as a teacher. Also, let the student speak early. Let the student have their say. Let them explain their side. Let them give their facts. Let them give suggestions on how they need to improve. Because if not, they're going to see it as a one side conversation. So, very early in, you need to say, listen, you know that you've done X, Y, and Z. Please explain yourself. Please give me another side of the issue that I may be missing. And please give some suggestions, because the suggestions I'm giving, the punishments or rewards I'm giving, are not working for you. Can you explain to me what would work for you on your end? Also, make sure you have the facts straight before you say anything, and try to see it from the student's perspective before you go in. Because, again, a lot of times the situation may be different than what you see because you're not living in that student's shoes. So make sure that you look through it there, and make sure the punishment that you're doing is fitting the crime. So again, we're not giving major, huge punishments for tiny little crimes. Make sure that the student is learning from it, because it's not so much about the punishment, it's about making the student better and improving. All right, so that is, again, just a few tips on how to make a positive learning environment out of your classroom.